We back.
And today's episode, I'm super excited about because we'll be talking about the importance of preserving and sharing our cultural stories. And I want to kick things off by sharing the experience we had at the Silverlens Art Gallery and the moment that, boom, made me feel like home. So we attended the Silverlens Artist Walkthrough. And if you're not familiar with Silverlens, for those listening, it's an art gallery. The first location is in Manila. And they recently opened Philippines, yes. And they recently opened a gallery in New York just a few years ago. And we had the pleasure of experiencing their exhibition or exhibits on the Galleon Trade.
Yeah, shout out to Patrick Martinez.
Yeah. And this is my first art exhibit in New York, right? And so I'm walking through in this art gallery, clean, beautiful, white space, quiet etiquette. And the doors open officially. And I hear in the background Filipino aunties chitter-chattering. And I look to my left and I see just Filipino aunties dripped in Louis Vuitton, Gucci. They got their purses, the shoes, the heels. You hear the click-clack of the thick sandals and the heels walking through. And I'm like,
full experience.
I'm like, we're back home. For me, this feels like a Filipino party. Like I got my aunties chismising, which means like gossiping in Tagalog, in the back, in this space where you normally don't feel that, or you don't really see that in a art gallery.
Right, energy was different.
Yeah.
It was turned up. It was almost like it was a show that we was walking into, a real show.
Absolutely, which was so great to see and to feel, because we're all in this space feeling very Filipino, just being who we are, doing what we do. And aunties cracking jokes about God knows what, and we're doing it in this space where art is just beautiful, and it's telling history, it's telling stories, it's talking about colonialism, but we're still like here in the present day. I was in between timelines, right, of history and culture, and then also being very present here with Filipinos and family here in America, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, no, I definitely loved the experience. It was like none other. I mean, I've been to a lot of art galleries, even in New York, across the country, but yeah, it felt like I walked into somebody's family reunion, right? And that even took me home. I mean, being surrounded by the beautiful colors, the different types of art pieces in there. But again, to your point, seeing them walk through and being like, okay, this turned into a fashion show real quick. Like, all right, we competing now. Like it was beautiful again, especially because I found out, through Patrick Martinez, who was featured, in this as well, in his art. Out of LA. So being able to, experience something that I had never experienced before. I don't care if it's Brooklyn Museum. I don't care. I'm at Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. Like this was just like, again, it felt like I walked into somebody's living room. And I was invited to the right type of cookout.
Yeah. All that was missing, I would say, is like the smell of lumpia and the lechon on the table. And lechon is the huge roasted pig that like everyone gathers around. I was like, I just needed someone to just chop up with a pot of rice. And like that would have been, we would have had a Filipino party in an art gallery in Chelsea in New York. So it was so dope. And I also want to talk about like the art that was there. I mean, you mentioned Patrick Martinez, but Elaine Navas' work was also there. And Jenifer Wofford was also featured as one of the artists. And the whole event was around the Galleon Trade. And for those who don't know what the Galleon Trade was, it was the Spanish trade route from Manila to Mexico to California. And it lasted about 2.5 centuries. At this, it's at the art gallery, it pretty much it's a metaphoric symbolism of like this exchange between cultures, between Filipinos and Chicanos. It was just so beautiful because there were it wasn't just Filipino art, right? Like I said, we saw I think an artist from Mexico flew in as well and talked about his art. So it was just so dope to see their interpretations of what the Galleon Trade is, and then also just beautifying like the exchange of cultures that we still see today. I mean, it's no joke when we say between Filipinos and Mexicans, we do say we're cousins. And it's not just because we have similar language, and foods, but we really are connected through historically this colonial like exchange, which was so important for me because I'm like, I want to know how many people, in our audience too, like knew about the Galleon Trade.
I surely didn't. I was lost. I mean, I know slave trade stuff, but
Right.
that's about the only thing that I really know historically about trades really was that. But again, as I've been in California as well, they talk about no immigrants, no spice. So
Yeah.
I started to learn a little bit more, from there. But definitely the name, I was like, what is that? Is that a ship name? You know what I mean? Because all we heard was like Mayflower and all the others. So yeah, no, this was new for me, and I truly appreciated it.
What I can at least talk about from like my own family experience and the immigrant experience is, coming to America, sometimes you work so hard to assimilate, to get a job, to make it here that we forget about like teaching next generations about our own Filipino history and how others have migrated even before us. Yeah. And so this was just a great way to see that in present time so we don't lose those stories because I know a lot of us are curious about it.
No. It was dope. It really made me think a bit, especially since you're talking about migration, made me think again about my own Black history, even my personal Black history and my own legacy through my family. And I got to shout out my high school friend and much more than that, Pulitzer Prize winner Tremaine Lee, because he was able to help capture part of my father's story through the Black Voices side of the Huffington Post back then. And he did a piece called Chicago's Great Migration. And I'm actually going to read a little bit from it, but you can Google it, where it talks about Blacks leaving historic neighborhoods to return south. And so it was pretty cool because as soon as this article starts, it shows the original Chicago boys picture, of the young Black boys sitting on a car, suited and booted and looking like it's Easter Sunday or something. I just want to read a passage if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it says, Chicago, nearly 7 decades ago, James Middleton was just a toddler when he watched a white man shoot and kill a Black man in the little town of Lambert, Mississippi. Had tagged along with his father to run errands and, giddy with excitement, sat in his daddy's Ford as they pulled up to a local restaurant. There was a commotion out front, a family friend arguing with the eatery's white owner who had a pistol in his hand. I don't even want to continue because the next part of this, you can kind of tell where it's about to go, but check it out. He ended up witnessing a Black man being killed by this white owner of this establishment. And for me, it kind of echoed, it's eerie, even as I read it and think about it, because it kind of echoed my own upbringing growing up in Chicago, because before the age of 5, I also saw a couple people killed, in front of my eyes, in front of the block, 93rd and Jeffrey, shout out Southside. But then also even at a church picnic, being able to see some of the same things. I really, truly appreciate being now old enough to actually be able to have my stories being told by others, but being told by our own people and our own voices. And that's the point that, I'm excited about this episode, us being able to capture and talk about different ways where we can control our own narratives, tell our true stories, and also elevate opportunities for us to talk about our legacies in a way that our families, would appreciate and others would appreciate as well. So yeah, shout out to, again, Tremaine Lee. We'll have him on a future episode as well. But I really got to shout him out because that great migration story, even when you're talking about something that's, a trade of goods, our great migration being a slave trade, but then also us coming from the South to the North, being able to tell those types of stories that are actually homegrown here for a lot of Black people in America.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no problem.
Because I know that a lot of folks have histories that share the same thing as you have, from the South going up north to Chicago, New York.
Yeah.
And migration happens, all the time. I mean, we're seeing people move now, even outside of the States. And so it's really personal to all of us that have experienced either by force or, right. by choice where we have to go. It makes me think of like, when we think about our family's history, what are things that we absolutely cannot afford to forget? What cannot be erased, and that makes me think of like my family's immigration story. My grandfather actually immigrated from the Philippines. He's from Cavite in the Philippines and came to San Diego. That was his first stop. And it's not uncommon. You'll hear folks coming to San Diego. You'll hear folks migrating to Virginia Beach. And what do these places have in common? They're like naval bases, right? So a lot of us came through to get citizenship through the U.S. military. So that was my grandfather's story. And I'll never forget when I asked him about, like when he got here, he said, Neng, that's what he calls me. Mm-hmm. Neng means like little girl, like my little girl. He goes, Neng, yeah, when I first got here, I remember I opened the door to the house and I walked in the street and there was nobody in the streets. And I go, what do you mean? He was like, it was just so quiet. I go, where is everybody? And he goes, oh, and then he realized everybody's at work. I need to go get a job, because he was staying with his brother at the time. When I go back home to the Philippines, there are a ton of people outside in the markets, on your front porch, like just chit-chatting, selling goods, just being home. And that was like his first moment of, I need to make something of myself. Nobody's chit-chatting in the street here. And my grandmother shortly followed after him while she was 8 months pregnant with my mom, which is, we don't do that anymore. It's strongly advised for women in their third trimester now to not travel, but to think like she made it just at the right time to be born, here, which is also a huge risk. I mean, you're coming from a new place you never even heard of. Your English isn't that great, and you're going to bring in a new person into this world. So I can only imagine all the learning curves or maybe even fears around coming here, but knowing like, this is my shot. I got to make this work.
And that was probably a bigger reason why, to your point, your earlier point of him living with his brother, why a household turned into its own kind of community, right? Everything happening in that one place, and so many, folks being able to care for one another, figure those things out, be their own daycare center. Even as you talk about it, the thing that I was thinking about is, what are the medical risks, right? But then also I think about what I kind of see being shown about Filipinos now. They talk
like
about
what?
If you go into the ER, if you want to find where Filipinos are, because again, I grew up and I was like, I ain't never met, until I went to California. And then next thing you know, I start to think about, hospitals and nursing and all of that. And then that being an area that you could find your community. Now they got TV shows and stuff talking about it. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction to you all.
Yeah, they always say that if you don't know where the Filipinos are, go to a hospital and you'll probably find one. They're taking care of you for sure. I think about that a lot, just about taking a chance. And you just got to make it. That's the American dream, And
especially for folks of color.
Absolutely.
Because I think it does kind of mirror the Black experience as well. Because even as I say that, I think about all my aunties, my sister, my nieces, they're all nurses, right? Or dental hygienists and those things. So or in food, right? Or doing hair and all of that. Like, those things that kind of take care of the home, those basic necessities, especially for us to kind of show up in a way that maybe America wants us to show up. So it's like, as I say it, I'm like, man, it is Filipinos. It is kind of interesting now that I think about the story of people of color who have come into this country and what we end up doing, that service industry, the front line.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important to like ask these questions to your folks, right? To know where people have moved and why. I think the moment for me that really got me curious and really serious about my own family's immigration stories was when my grandmother had a stroke. And it changes you a little bit when the person you are supposed to go to and ask questions can't answer those anymore or can't recall them anymore. And so that's why I think about what gets lost and what I can't afford to lose anymore. And so what I've started to do with my grandmother since her stroke, aside from rehabilitation and getting her back, was
turn into a nurse.
That home care. Folks know that it's side note. I always said I've never wanted to be a nurse. I have no interest in being part of healthcare. I don't do blood. I don't do needles. But somehow I ended up being pushed into that role, taking care of my family. So it never really escaped me. But during that time, taking care of, my grandfather had health issues and so did my grandma. I just started to ask teeny tiny questions here and there so it doesn't like overwhelm them. But I said, what was your first job when you came here? Or who taught you, English? Or who was like your mentor who you looked up to? And funny enough, when I asked my grandpa, like, who really taught him, the ropes, like being in the Navy and who he could confide in, it was a Black man named Jerry in the Navy. So it was like even this history of you're talking about similarities with Black people and Black culture. I was like, that was my grandpa's mentor. And that's who helped him figure out, got his English better, taught him how to be a better mechanic in the Navy. And so I can't ignore that even I'm doing this podcast with you, and we had great knowledge sharing exchange, and it's like it repeats itself just in a different way, and which is so beautiful to me. And I would have never known if I wouldn't have asked those questions about us, about where we come from.
That's dope.
Yeah,
that's definitely dope. No, I appreciate you being willing to share all of that. I think the biggest thing is, even as maybe not the biggest thing, but even one point that you just elevated was that role of being a caregiver, which then gave you the opportunity to be someone that could then future storytell, your past, your family's legacy, and how they came into all of this. So I think as we look forward and thinking about the time that we share, because even as I grew up, we, learned a lot on the stoops, or depending on where you grow up. If you got a stoop, you got a front porch, even a backyard, those were those opportunities for us to sit, engage with our elders, and then really kind of learn where our strength really comes from. Thinking about how many jobs my dad had, or even when I think about the Phillips brand and, them coming through the church, it was so much that came through the church and us being preachers' kids that then went into the ability to write, the ability to storytell, even better. But I know that I ended up calling on that. Like once I really understood it, really listened to my grandfather, really listened to my father, really listened to my uncles and aunties, I really started to be like, that's why I'm kind of nice with a pen, right? Like you think about rappers and all of this other stuff and the things that you might be doing at that time, and you're just like, nah, man, this is my legacy. This is where it comes from. This ain't new, right? Like this is just the remix.
It's not
of anything,
just a
right?
self-made kind of thing. You're looking at generations of people that have had success, shared their stories,
in more and more creative ways. Because even as I say that, I think about again rapper music and stuff, right? Like I think about my pops, the stories he told me about Sam Cooke, James Brown in Chicago, so many gospel singers and stuff, but them all kind of being a community, and he drove cars. But it didn't really start that way. I mean, again, a part of his legacy was that he worked for the train system, the CTA in Chicago, right? But then there was an accident that was negligence on the side of the CTA, which then something fell on his head. And so he ended up getting a severance package, kind of like an early severance package of being like, man, well, now that we know that something just happened to your head, or you might have a brain injury, like we need to get you up off of here and you can no longer maneuver these trains. But he ended up using that package, the giveaway and walk away and don't sue us package, right, to then buy a Lincoln Town Car. One thing that he actually knew was the city of Chicago and how to get around. And so because of that, then he ended up getting clients that started in the church, but then people that he grew up with, which are like the Sam Cookes and those folks, even shout out Emmett Till, rest in peace. But like all of those folks growing up west side to the south side of Chicago is kind of how he got his start, which then even me growing up in Chicago, being the little kid that sat in the front seat as he drove rich people around. Michael Jordan's mom, there's Jesse Jackson, Uncle Jesse Jackson, like a whole bunch of people.
So the spirit
was very strong. He was great at making sure that I was able to see it all, right? And see all of the possibilities that, were in front of me, really because of some of his relationships, right? I didn't have to drive a car or follow that. I had the opportunity to sit here and learn from those folks who were in that backseat, who were sharing the other stories and stuff. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool for me, upbringing from something that somebody might say is like, you just an Uber driver, like now, right? Like, but my pops was, an original, an OG, like Uber driver, which then turned into a whole bunch of stuff. Seriously, they definitely need to do that.
You provided great beginnings, right? But what I hear you talk about too is the Phillips brand a lot. Can you tell me more about the Phillips brand?
Shout out to Russell Clayton Phillips, the OG of it. And then my dad, Russell Clayton Phillips Jr., and then my brother is Russell Clayton Phillips III. My grandfather, rest in peace. I think the biggest thing for me, and again, I don't have to tell his story as much as somebody else already does. Because earlier this year in Pennsylvania, in the small town of Pennsylvania, the elementary school was renamed in his honor.
Your grandfather's
after my
name.
grandfather's.
Wow.
Russell C. Phillips Elementary School in Farrell, Pennsylvania, not too far outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's my grandfather, who was the first black everything in that region, right? First black teacher, first black football coach, championship. Like he was the first of all of those things, which then made my life a lot easier, right? Because I knew that he made something possible. He was the first, then I can probably do a whole bunch of firsts as well. So I got to really shout out my grandfather for starting this Phillips brand legacy, as we call it. Shout out my auntie, as well, who just released another book, long-term employee of Merck, global vice president, just retired, chief diversity officer, did so much, there. But again, just dropped her new book, and we'll have to have her on this as well. But I come, behind who I already feel are legends that are just right in my own household and in my own bloodline. So again, I can't even get too much credit, because even the work that I do now, I'm like, well, my auntie be trumping me every time, right? Like, it's like, shoot, yeah, I might have did some things, but my auntie did it first, right? So yeah, I got to shout out the Phillips brand. I got to shout out everyone who's done that. I got my little cousins and stuff who, big time track athletes and soccer athletes. We do come from an athletic family as well. We All-Americans and all of that stuff. I'm talking about 10, 11 time All-Americans, all of us, track, basketball, football. We've done some stuff in the next level of Phillips are coming in too. So might have a couple people in the NFL shortly. So shout out to my cousin, Julius.
So Phillips brand really branches through different industries.
Yeah, and it really started because we got a strong foundation that allowed us to then be able to chase our dreams versus having to start one.
And you have articles written about that. You have books around the family. That's what I think is so exciting. I think about what I'm seeing with Filipinos right now is this real intentionality around documentation. Yeah. How do we keep these stories? How do we record these stories? We do it through all different kinds of ways, right? Going to Silverlens, whether you're in Manila, Philippines, or whether you're in New York, stop in. It can be through art. It can be through music. It can be through community organizing, writing your books, doing a podcast. Yeah. And I think we're getting better at getting all those collections of art and pieces and culture together. But because we're still so new, right? We've got only, I think in my family, three generations, here, as opposed to like 4 or 5, or there's some people that just have one generation here. It's a really interesting time for Filipino Americans in documenting our histories, even in the state of the political climate.
Right. And y'all more than just nurses. It's like, I think I went to the Brooklyn Museum. I don't know if you've gone to the Brooklyn Museum, but I went to the Brooklyn Museum recently, really to see the solid gold exhibit that they had there, which really talks about Black history, Black excellence, and so much more. But I remember going through what felt like an Asian exhibit.
I know what you're talking about. So the Asian exhibit's on a different floor.
Yes,
I did see that. I feel like when I went to the Brooklyn Museum, I barely scratched the surface because you could spend all day in there and still not be done. The one that you're talking about.
I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I cut you off. But
no. So
this Asian floor, I definitely saw like Indian influence, Japanese, Chinese, and I was looking for Filipinos. Even in the gold one, I saw it right before it closed, actually, the gold exhibit.
The solid gold.
Hello, Filipinos used to wear gold before we were exploited for it. Like the history behind gold, part of it is we believe that wearing gold on your fingers, on your toes, those are, protection so that evil spirits don't go in through these like entry points. Or even when you pass away, what we would do is actually put gold masks over your eyes and your mouth to keep evil spirits away while you're transitioning, through the dead. And so I'm like looking for that. I was immediately floored. Maybe I missed it. Brooklyn Museum can shout me out and invite me back to do a story on it.
We can do that. You can still do that.
But I was like, yeah, we're not here. And I was so surprised, especially in the Asian, like the Southeast Asian part.
Yeah.
What's going on? Because I know Filipinos are also here in New York. So, that's the disconnect.
Yeah. But it also, to me, opened up a different path, right? Like, to your point, and this was, again, on a different floor, the Southeast Asia, like I was intentional around being like, okay, so what's the part of the Philippines that they're showing me? And when I like circled it, I'm like, okay, hold on. I'm here. I don't see anything. and I see that they, show the Philippines on here, but I was like, there's nothing culturally here. So I thought about it two different ways. One way was I was like, okay, maybe this place wasn't robbed yet, right? Or maybe this place they don't know the value or see the value. But then it also made me think like, well, what is actually there? And who are the holders of that? Because it feels like maybe y'all still have it, right? Like maybe you still have ownership of the things that we traditionally see in these museums. And if so, I think there is that opportunity. That I think that's probably why Silverlens exists, right? Even though Silverlens for me felt like it's new artists, right, that are showing and giving us the stories of the Philippines basketball. Again, shout out to Jenifer. But I did look at it and walk away like, oh my gosh, y'all can still tell your story. And then own the value of it rather than it being taken from you, leased out. Again, the hardest parts that I have going through museum, I love it, member of all of these museums, but the hardest part is when I look, especially even in that solid gold, and I see how they got it, how the museum got it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like 1913, this family,
a gift.
Requested, right? Like they did all of these things, but I'm just like, well, who had it and who sold it initially? Like, how did you get it? But how much did you buy it for?
That we want.
And so, like, I look at that to be like, well, shoot.
Maybe
put a tax on it.
Yeah.
Like now, because I'm sure back then it was, pennies on a dollar versus now if they have it and you can put it out there, put that extra tax for all of us that couldn't put the tax on it, right? That might have gotten the stuff stolen through wars and those things. So like I did walk away feeling like, man, there's an opportunity for you, for your culture, for your folks, for your people to actually elevate or again, bring things. We talk about, you started it with the Galleon Trade, right? Of them having that ship and bringing different things. It's like, well, now how can you bring it from the plains, right? Like how can you just literally come from the Philippines and bring that, history of that, the jewels, the gems, what you actually have there. Again, I don't know.
Which takes me back to like if you've got grandparents, great aunts or uncles, especially folks that are transitioning, passing away, and you go through their stuff, you might find something that tells a huge story that could be in an exhibit one day.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to know, like, from our audience, like, if you have something that tells a story that you found, like, please share it with us in the comments. Send us an email. We want to hear about it. I'm like, do we need to put together our own
vinyl
cultural,
to viral? Yeah, let's take this on the road. Yeah,
it would be so dope. But would love to hear your stories and love to find, the things that you find, the gems that you would find in your own family, history.
Yeah, because I'm interested. I really am interested because I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, aside again from like spice and those types of things, like what actually does come, from the Philippines. And again, just going really quickly back to the Silverlens, what is it? The flower. What's that flower? The
Sampaguita. That's our national flower.
Yeah, but not that one.
Oh, the birds of paradise. Yes.
Yeah. Like seeing that flower and then realizing that flower is actually a South African flower. I just remember
I didn't know that.
It. I didn't either. I always thought that it was just like some
Hawaii,
island or something. Yeah.
In the Pacific, Polynesia.
To hear the Filipino folks tell us that actually was from South Africa and came through this trade, it took me back to my time in Bermuda because I see a lot of that flower in Bermuda. Then I think about Bermuda as being the place that the slave ship hit the rock, right? Mm-hmm. And then those slaves became free, kind of, then England came and did their thing, make sure they weren't free. It did make me think like, oh my gosh, some of them on those slave ships had those flowers. And that's how it got to a place like Bermuda, right? All of these stories seem to, especially for our communities of color, to already exist as a community, as things that we have. And America kind of inherited by way of these different trade ships that came through. So it was pretty powerful as I think about the whole story, even as I, talking through this conversation, making me realize the other places and spaces that I've seen these things. And now I'm able to learn the true history, right? I think it's pretty cool. And that's why we really call on you all to let us know, like things that you might have, things that you might find that we can help elevate your story so that, again, your legacy comes through and we can share that as well.
Yeah. And I'm trying to do that, for my own family, but also through this passion project I'm working on.
Talk about it.
What I'm working on is sort of like baseball cards, but for Filipino icons and changemakers, and present day, and also like historic. There'll be some historical figures, but I think now is such an important time to document these people. I mean, you said it earlier. We've got people in music that have been in music for years. I'm talking about like Illmind, right? Or not just Olivia Rodrigo. Like, I mean, her too, but we've got so many cultural...
Super producer Illmind.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we've got so many folks, not just in California. I'm getting out of my California bubble, but here in New York, Chicago, even down south. Like, we're everywhere. I get chills talking about it because I'm like, this is a time to document these stories. This is the time to sort of memorialize folks and their accomplishments. So stay tuned, follow us, follow me on the gram.
Because I can't really just stop with that because, again, Illmind is a dope story. Because I don't know if people know who Illmind is, super producer. A lot of the buzz during this time with G Unit and creating a whole bunch of different hip hop beats, rap beats. But he always wore something over his face. Right?
What?
So no one knew who Illmind was, and I just remember being like, "This is a soulful cat," because a lot of his beats and stuff had a lot of soul, and it made me think about Chicago. And when I started my marketing agency, Fusion, I ended up hiring my creative director who also rapped on this album. He was from Guam. And so during the time that I started up Fusion Entertainment, doing all of this stuff, he was like, yo, I got your guy. I got the producer that can be the in-house producer for Fusion. I just remember being our office at that point in time was right next to Joe's Pub. A shout out to Amanda Seals and stuff. Hers was above us as well. And he came into the office and L, Natural, if you don't know who he is, he's also an artist as well, does some stuff in Puma and a bunch of stuff in fashion. L brings in Illmind. He's like, all right, I want to introduce you to Illmind. In walks Illmind, this Filipino dude. I'm sitting here looking past him like,
where you at?
And then it's Illmind, and I'm like, say word, right? Stop playing. You're Illmind, right?
Wait, this mask?
No. Okay. He came in, dang near bald head. He came in looking Filipino. But it was wild. Like, I had to share that story because it was like, oh my gosh, somebody that, again, even drew inspiration from, again, a lot of Chicago music and stuff as well. And so my start in music in terms of us really doing the Fusion Entertainment started with Illmind actually being in the seat to be our in-house producer and figure everything out for
producer for a lot of your probably favorite hits for folks listening in. Definitely check out his genius and his discography is so sick. That's what I'm saying. How many years ago was that?
That's not like 20 years ago. Yeah, about 20 years ago now.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, he needs a card, right? He needs to be in a flashcard. The kids need to know about Illmind. Stuff like. So I'm glad you got to share that story.
You brought him up because I forgot. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. No. That's dope. And that project is crazy again, especially in the era of flashcards, baseball cards, ways that we can, learn in a unique way, but also in a enriching and entertaining way, so it doesn't really feel, that. But I think you memorializing those for folks, I'm sure would be a feather in their cap. I'm sure they're going to appreciate being seen again, even as we talked about Jenifer and Elaine and those folks as well. Like the joy that they had to just be like, oh my gosh, I'm Filipino and I'm in New York and I'm in this exhibit, right? Like, it doesn't happen all the time. And so for you to create that space for us to, like we said, this is vital to viral where leaders, creators, and cool folks are building a legacy and looking to leave one behind as well. So you're literally doing that. You're talking the talk and walking the walk. So we appreciate you. And I got to make sure I give you your flowers on that too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And this is like a call to action for our folks, also listening. What is the legacy you're going to leave? How are you creating, moments that tell a story and tell your history so it doesn't get lost? And there'll be more of that, it's just, but appreciate you having this conversation with me and also allowing me to have space to share my family's immigrant story and also to propel the next generation to write the article, make the music, organize, be together, come dressed in your Louis Vuitton, Gucci, be yourself, bring the lumpia, and we're going to have a party.
And invite us.
Thanks, folks. This is all Vinyl to Viral.
Vinyl to Viral.